And do we know, Brad, if anyone else is
I believe Mayor Beavis is coming, and Samantha Finger. Or Lisa Witherbone. Oh, she's ill?
Samantha is ill and Lisa.
Oh.
Oh, golly. Samantha?
Half the committee is down.
I know.
As long as they didn't bring the germs here, good.
They must all have small children at home.
So, Madam Chair, I think you need to make a motion and approve that Commissioner Justice can participate by telephone.
All right, well, probably best
For the
if
record.
Patty makes the motion since I'm the chair.
Yeah.
I would like to make a motion that Charlie Justice be allowed to vote by phone since he's ill today.
Yeah.
Second, and
Great.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay,
And
that's
now,
good.
Travis, do you have any comments you'd like to make as a public citizen? You're just here to listen. Okay. Anybody else here that I need to? What?
We can make a motion to force it.
Well, that's probably not going to fly. Okay, so meeting minutes, do we want to approve the meeting minutes from January 4th?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes of January the 4th.
Okay.
Have a
Charlie?
second?
Second?
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so Brad, would you like to talk about the upcoming trip to Tallahassee?
Yes, I would like to talk about that and some upcoming trips to Washington, D.C. we hope as well.
Oh, my.
Good afternoon. So next week, we are headed to Tallahassee with what I believe will be the largest collective group of board members we've ever taken to Tallahassee, if everyone is still a go. Right now, I believe we have 5 PSTA board members who have agreed to go, including Commissioner Johnson. We are going next Tuesday and Wednesday, leaving PSTA around noontime on Tuesday and going up to Tallahassee. I think Natalie can maybe describe more details about what we're going to do once we're in Tallahassee, and then come back on Wednesday, Wednesday afternoon on the 8th. Of course, we're going to be advocating for our state legislative priorities, which are listed there on your agenda, but maybe some other opportunities to talk to some of our state legislators.
So we will, assuming you guys get on the ground about 5 o'clock, we will let you get to your hotel and get square, and then we have reservations at 7 p.m. at Edison, where we're going to host our dinner. It's quite nice. We'll get you all the information and we'll coordinate all the logistics. We will hopefully we're hoping to have confirmation that Senator Brandis will join us as our guest for dinner. We do have other backups in case for some reason there's a conflict of time for him. But we will also be working to get a few elected officials just to do what we call drive-bys. If they can't stay for the whole dinner, they just come by and stop by to say hello. We will use...
You remember those days, Janet, right?
Yeah. Drive by, all of 10 minutes.
But we are trying to get an actual dinner guest, so we're working on that in addition to the drive-bys. And then we will use dinner to prepare, obviously, for meetings the next day. We will have some housekeeping work to do just to make sure that everyone's comfortable with what to expect the next day. Send everybody off with their itineraries, their final itineraries. We will have provided you guys with the tentative itinerary, but as most of us who have been to Tallahassee know, it's an ever-changing, fluid environment. So what we think we know the day before the meeting will be completely different than what we actually know the day of. So we'll be working through that. And then the next day, the Wednesday, the 8th, we have a slew of meetings that are being confirmed now. Many are already confirmed, and I will be providing that to you. But we've got all of our delegation members requested. I know that Newton's already confirmed, but we'll be confirming with Ahern and Diamond and Grant and Peters and Sprouse and the Latvalas. And so we'll be looking to spend time with each and every one of them. We also have folks like Steve Holmes from the Transportation Advantage Director. It looks like we'll probably be meeting with him over at DOT around 3:30-ish. And then what we're going to be doing is we'll have a small break in between to give time in case we're running late. And then we've got Ms. Cohn, the interim secretary of DOT, Ed Coven, the Director of Transportation, Ed Coven's boss, who I didn't write down the name of, and a couple others that they would like to bring to the meeting, and we're going to do a group meeting with all of them at 4:30. That will be the last meeting of the day, and then you guys would be able to get on the road, hopefully by 5. They're going to give us a half an hour.
Okay.
That's what they've scheduled us for. Now, again, if our conversation's going well, we'll, continue on, but we booked 4:30. So we've got other folks that are just high-profile folks that are on key committees that we'll also be scheduling with. For example, we have the vice chair of TEDAPRO, Bobby Powell, just folks like that, if, as we fill out. There's also other folks on transportation and appropriation committees that as slots are available, we'll go back and backfill against those lists as well. But we're going to do the high target profiles first. So you guys will basically start your morning, and we'll put this itinerary together with us. We will do a little debrief from the night before, and then we'll take you guys over to the Capitol. And because the meetings are 15-minute intervals, we will plan to try to build them out so that we can have a meeting. It's 15 minutes. It's 15 minutes to make your move. 15 minutes. If we get a double booking, and it's the only time that we can see 2 individuals, we will divide and conquer. And so we will just manage that. But because they are just now scheduling, the block calendars for that week are out, but not all the individual agendas, or if there's not going to be a meeting of a committee, we probably won't have that until later this week, but it all comes in for a landing, usually around Thursday. So that's
Great.
what we're looking for.
Great. And Rachel, what is the hotel that we are
That's a
staying
lot
in?
of work.
Edward.
Renaissance Inn.
Was it
One of the hotels that you've gone to a few times up there. Renaissance Inn.
They're also memorable.
Tallahassee, and then it says Casper.
Okay. So more to come on that. Thank you, Patty, for coming. I know, like as Natalie said, we are going to be meeting with Steve Holmes. He's the executive director of the TV Commission. He's a big fan of PSTA because we're doing these innovative things here that no one else in the state is doing. And of course, he's a big fan of PSTA because you're the official of the year for him. So that'll be a good meeting, I'm sure. And we can press him on releasing and then allowing us to advocate to the extent that it has good stuff in it, the study that he is sitting on or reviewing right now related to that.
Are you familiar, Brad, with the TAG program?
No, I'm not.
Well, it says you are because it says PSTA is part of it.
Oh, excellent.
This is supposed to be a proclamation that's made by the Suncoast League of Cities, and they wouldn't know transportation if they fell in it. And I don't know what they're proclaiming. However, they have put up our logo, and they've put up MPO or Forward Pinellas. They've put everybody's logo on top of this thing.
The Suncoast League of Cities?
Mm-hmm.
So Patty, as a member of the Suncoast League, I would like to see you follow up with that and ask them who they're contacting at PSTA, since the executive director knows nothing about it, and neither did their legislative
And
committee.
neither does the Tampa Bay Partnership, and they're listed, their logo's on there as well. They know nothing about
So
it.
could you please follow up on that, because that's a dangerous thing to put that out there when nobody knows about it, and we've got several messages to the legislators.
There-
I don't know anything about it either.
At that Suncoast League of Cities meeting I attended where Commissioner Long presented
I was there.
at the Phillies stadium, there was a poster that somebody had brought, that I think is what you're talking about. It talked about something that the League of Cities is doing with transportation, supporting transportation or something, and it had different logos on it. And I think
Well, they
maybe,
can't use those logos without permission,
yeah,
so that's a problem, I think.
Okay, I'm sending an email right now to Angela Christ, because she is the
okay.
Okay, you handled that. Brad, continue on, please.
Well, and then, so that's the trip to Tallahassee. I think some of us, myself not included, but there will be maybe somebody from PSA going later in March as well, associated with Transportation Disadvantage Day, which is scheduled for March 14th. I won't be able to go to Tallahassee that day because I'll be in Washington DC, and there may be other opportunities for us to go to Tallahassee. You might have seen in the some of the news articles that Hart discussed whether they should join us in Tallahassee, and they decided that maybe not be the greatest idea, or that they didn't want to necessarily go together to Tallahassee. Their board is scheduled to meet next Monday on February 6th, and according to Catherine Egan, just as of Friday, it looks like they will approve of the MOU between PSTA and Hart, the collaboration MOU, but since they're not going to come with us to Tallahassee, that'll be one of the items that we definitely want to talk to the different legislators about and show them this is the document. We'll have some other summary version of what's in it for the legislators to talk to them about it by ourselves.
So, Ron, did you get any feedback from Senator Latvala on his misunderstanding with regard to that joint interlocal agreement? He seemed to be under the impression that several people over there were opposed to it.
So Alan talked to him, and Alan seemed to believe that they have, to the best of his ability, kind of cleared up the miscommunication there, yes.
Very good, thank you. Right.
I'll just quickly mention the federal trips that we're planning.
Oh, yeah.
We sent out an email to the, I believe to the full PSTA board about 2 weeks ago, giving several options for a April or May visit to Washington DC. I don't know too much feedback yet. Yeah, we'll probably need to send it out again, or maybe send it in like an official doodle. I think I just sent it out as a regular email instead of like a survey.
What's the date you're thinking about in April?
Well, we had originally settled on, I believe, April 3rd and 4th. Let me see if I can. 4th and 5th.
You have a conflict, I think, with the county, is that?
Well, no, I mean, the 2nd, the 3rd, 4th, 5th could actually work.
I think the issue that came up at the last legislative committee meeting
Well,
was
the fact.
Florida Association of Counties was going to be in Tallahassee
On that Wednesday.
on April 5th. So we sent out a follow-up email that we'll send out again that listed those days as still a possibility of going to DC, and then a couple of others. I can try to find out what the other options
Does it
were.
matter if it's April or May? Does it matter from a timing standpoint?
I always think earlier is better, just because with the appropriation season going, I'm aware that May gets to be too late, what you're trying to do.
Yeah. We're trying to coordinate when both the House and Senate are in
The
session.
appropriations process is running behind schedule this year because they didn't finish last year's work, plus the new president's not going to submit a budget request till later this year, so
Awesome.
may not be too late, but it's starting to push.
So is the end of March not good?
The end of March is fine. The only weeks that aren't good are the week of President's Day in February and the middle 2 weeks of April, which Congress is in recess for the Easter break. So other than those, they're pretty much in session all February, March, and April. Brad's going to be up there, I think, March 12th for the APTA.
Yeah, and then in addition, the AFTA conference is March 12th that I'll be planning to go, and would love to have a couple of PSTA board members come with me to that time as well. What Harry and I were talking about was, since the March timeframe is a busier timeframe, and maybe too early for the new administration and everything to have their proposals completely put together, that one would maybe be more of a policy-focused meeting. We would try to meet with some of the congressional delegation or the staff, and then schedule some meetings with the Federal Transit Administration and with Uber to advance our priority to count the Uber connecting rides that we now have toward our federal transportation funding, which Harry maybe in a second can give a little update on. There's a lot going on in DC about that. And that in March, if we go, we try to advance that discussion, meeting with the staff, with Uber, and then to Hill visits that we might be able to accomplish. Then when we're there at maybe a more quiet or less intense time in April, we would go and meet with our congressional delegation plus maybe other key transportation committee and other committee members as well. So we'll send that back out to your staffs to hopefully get some folks to go. I know I've talked to some other PSTA board members who have expressed interest in going either once to one of those two options. So that's what's going on with the trips. I thought the rest of our time together would be for Ron and Natalie first, and then Harry to give us a status report on all the exciting things that are going on related to our priorities, which I've passed out the state one, which we can go through, and then I'll pass out the federal one, just to remind us what we have, but then they can update us on anything else that they've been hearing. So Ron, do you want to start with our state priorities?
Yep, so let me run through this. I can be pretty quick. Number one, the Clearwater Beach to TI Express bus. We met with Senator Brandis, who's obviously going to be key in that discussion. What we're trying to do there is to get it included as a part of the DOT work plan. Senator Brandis had a couple of questions. Number one, he had a question about the overall cost. He wanted to know, he wants to see our ridership numbers that we're projecting to make sure they match up to what the funding would be, number one. The number two, he suggested initially is, would this make more sense to do as a pilot versus doing as something that is as a part of the work plan? So he's looking at some options. We're in the process of getting him the ridership numbers to kind of review those, and then we'll report back to you all once we follow up with him. He did say, by the way, this is important, the original strategy was going to be have the delegation submit a letter to the to DOT asking for it to be included as a part of the work plan. He said, don't do that, take a step back, allow him to get involved. He's the one that makes one phone call now as chair of TED to DOT to get something concluded. But he said before we do that, he really wants to see the ridership numbers and maybe make it a pilot program, maybe scale it back a little bit to make it work. So that was number one. The TD study recommendation review, Brad, you may have more on this than I do. I think we're still waiting for the draft to come out. Hopefully when we're in Tallahassee next week, we can kind of see where, what they're thinking. Senator Brandis is very interested in trying to help us there. And again, as the chair of the TED Appropriations Committee in the Senate, is in a position to help. So we'll follow up once we have the final report. Then the Clearwater Beach Causeway bus design funding, we're asking for $1 million. As you all know, the House now has a new way. You have to submit budget requests for member projects. Chris Latvala submitted the member project last week. He has all the information, so I'm not sure he hit send on it either Friday or probably early this week, but he will submit it for us. We're also working with Senator Brandis on that, who seemed, I think open to trying to help there as well. And then we've obviously been talking to folks about the MOU, and once we actually have a signed document, we'll definitely use as our talking points next week in Tallahassee to make sure that they're aware of that. So those are the 4 issues on our agenda as a quick update.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I'll just add just a couple things on those items. On the transportation disadvantage study, I had a good conversation with the consultant back in December who had completed the study when we were in Jacksonville, and he had told me that he had already completed the study and described generally that they had looked at a bunch of other states and how they allocate similar funds and had a series of recommendations to the commission that I thought were pretty good and that looked like they would result in PSTA getting some additional funding, or basically level out the rural versus urban issue. I've heard some other people more skeptical that the Commission for Transportation Disadvantage would never do anything to benefit the urban areas. So they couldn't possibly believe that the study would have anything good for us in there. So I don't know. I then heard that, yes, Steve Holmes, the executive director, has the study and is reviewing it. He's had the study since before Christmas. So when we're there next week, the ask is for him to publish the study or make it public, and then maybe have Senator Brandis or somebody request that a presentation be made so it gets into the light of day, especially if the recommendations are good for us or make it more even. I think that's important. Otherwise, there's a chance that the study may just get put on the shelf and nothing ever happened with it. On the Clearwater Beach Causeway, it's good that Senator Brandis and others seem to be supportive of it. I believe it was Senator Latvala, actually, who asked the district secretary some time ago to complete an engineering report. And that report has been completed. Cassandra has a copy. And it's very positive about the feasibility of doing doing a busway, unlike, I think, some other mixed messages that maybe Senator Latvala had heard previously that it wasn't possible. The report says, indeed, it is possible. I mean, it's feasible, and then updates now 10-year-old cost estimates and some design features to the modern time. So it looks like that study can really help support our ask to move this project forward into some more detailed design.
And we're telling members, by the way, that obviously the state dollars to get it initiated is important. And once we get them to buy in, we believe there's a pot of federal dollars we can tap into potentially, where it's not the state having to come and fund the entire project. So they were excited about that potentially.
And I don't know if you know this, Ron, but Janet Zink at the airport, they are very much in support of what we're doing because they feel that that will help take traffic from Clearwater International right out to Clearwater Beach. So anything that they can do, she's already told me they're more than happy to jump on board.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then last on the transmittal.
Wait, Brad, hold on, did you have something?
Sorry.
I just want to reiterate to even the legislators and the senators and everyone I've talked to feel that they don't understand that transportation disadvantaged and PSTA, even though PSTA governs and does it, are two separate pots of money. And they're confusing the two. And while I was in Jacksonville, the one thing that was brought up to me is that the gentleman with transportation disadvantaged gets a phone call from the governor's office every day of his life asking how many people went to work, how many more people went to work. And they don't realize that transportation disadvantaged has anything with the governor's going back to work program. They think that it's all going on the other side. I don't know how to explain it. It is going on a regular bus for the majority. It's not a choice bus rider. It's a TD bus rider that's on a regular bus. Do you understand what I'm... So when they're looking at pots of money, they're not taking them apart. They're thinking, oh, we got all this money, we got all these people sent to work.
Yeah.
They're not giving you the money over here to put people on the bus over here. That's the only way I know how to say it. I know you guys can say it a lot better, so it sounds better, so they understand it better.
Well,
But that's what has happened to me all last week when I was in Tallahassee, every one of them, including Lapball. They're all putting all of that money in one pot.
Okay, well, that's helpful information, obviously, in the way we message what the study is all about
In
is,
the newspaper. They finally got the word choice in this very last
Yeah,
newspaper
congratulations,
message.
that was a great editorial in today's paper.
yeah, yeah.
And they got the word choice in there, finally. But they didn't explain what choice meant,
Well, they did a little bit.
They did a little bit.
but not.
As I was telling Harry, they sort of, the editorial writers themselves were giving me their own personal commuting experiences so
sure.
much.
Okay, so continue, Brad, please.
Last, on the transmittal of the PSTA HART collaboration MOU, I know there's been a lot of discussion about this, I guess. And Ron can say a few words maybe about the Tampa Bay partnership, and the business leaders have put some attention toward this. They had a guest speaker from the Eno Institute come, and they had Jeff Vinnick and some other business leaders hear discussion about consolidating either the MPOs or PSTA and HART. Catherine and I were there from Transit, and then the MPO directors were there. This was earlier in January. And, that there's a lot of details and discussion going on. I think what I hear is that the partnership has an idea. It wants to be supportive of this, wants to be supportive of regional transportation solutions, I would say. Very supportive of the HART and PSTA collaboration efforts. I know Travis told me that the St. Pete Chamber is supportive of PSTA and HART collaborating. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's on our legislative agenda.
Yeah. So I think we're getting a lot of good publicity about what we're doing together with HART. Certainly the Tampa Bay Times was very supportive of it. I think there is still a lot of open questions about a regional MPO and how that might work. And I know the Bay Area delegation is going to be meeting and is going to be talking about it this week. And I don't know, maybe there's other forums. Ron, do you want to?
Yeah, so what the Tampa Bay Partnership's working on, we actually met with Janet earlier, I guess last Friday, and they're looking at coming up with, you need to keep planning separate, so you have to have a planning organization, and you have to have a true regional transportation organization as well. And one of their ideas is potentially looking at, if you want a true regional transit authority, TBARTA has a lot of good information in there where you can go back and use that statute potentially to basically create almost a new organization. Number one, shrink the organization down to maybe sort of 3-county footprint, number one. But number two, look at it in such a way where you actually give them the option, the ability from a functional standpoint to actually deal with some regional transportation issues. It wouldn't impact PSTA and HART from a day-to-day standpoint. They would still operate in the respective counties, but it would open up the opportunity from a regional transportation standpoint to deal with larger projects that potentially impact Pasco, Hillsborough, and Pinellas counties. So we met with Janet last week, so I don't know if you've got any comments you wanted to add on the direction they're going.
No, I think that almost unwittingly, because we met several months ago, Ron and Natalie, I think you were there, Natalie, myself and the Tampa Bay Partnership folks, and I outlined the plan that I had been working on. And the way in which we came about creating a joint agreement, interlocal agreement between PSTA and HART, and like everything else in life, it starts with building a relationship. So Catherine and I worked really hard on that for about a year and a half, and voila, now we are moving forward. And the plan that Ron and Ryan brought to me on Friday was very in-depth, dots a lot of I's and crosses a lot of T's. But at the end of the day, when you cut through it all, and if you don't message it with starting out with repurposing TBARTA, it does pretty much exactly what the vision that I started talking about a year ago is trying to accomplish. And it uses existing language already in the statute under the T-BARTA statute. So if we just totally do away with the way in which it's organized and not make it so big and focus on the 3 counties, have an entirely new board made up of the 3 counties and whoever
And a bunch of business leaders.
and a bunch of business leaders at the table, I think we can actually really get something done and comply with the federal mandate, and kind of be flexible enough in that design to be able to accommodate whatever comes out of Washington.
The only-
Because right now, it's so all up in the air, right?
And the only thing I would add to that is, in our conversation on Friday was, this session, you would use almost, create a vehicle that would be this regional transportation authority that's out there. And then remember, the 2018 session is earlier, so we can give DC an opportunity to figure out what in the world they're doing. So we can pass something this year to change T-BARTA. You go back into committee weeks in September, you go back into session January of 2018, and at that point, you kind of figure out, if there's any funding opportunities based upon what's happened in DC, and look at other opportunities at that point to take it to the next step, again, depending on, kind of what are the marching orders out of Washington, DC.
And again, with the repurposing kind of construct, it's really more they're taking it and they're refining the focus of authority under its current statutory permissions. It just refines it down to a manageable, effective, construct. So, I mean, would that make more sense from a language, you think, or?
I think, and this is just my own personal opinion, I told you all from the beginning, I'm not married to any of this. I just think that continuing to talk about the T-BARTA piece is a negative in a lot of people's minds. And you're more inclined to be successful if you talk about creating a new transportation authority focusing on Tampa Bay, which is where the real data is to drive this decision. That's where the density is, that's where the congestion is, and hence, that's what you're moving forward on. Because if you follow the formula that your facts determine your data, and your data gets you to the decision, I mean, forget about that T-BARTA piece. In my mind, the only thing it's good for in the moment is the implementing language after you get through the first paragraph,
Vehicle, yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
if you talk about that, the way you talk about repurposing, in a lot of people's minds, that's, there they go again. There's government trying to put diamonds on a pig. Well, diamonds on a pig, it's still a pig. So let's just create the diamonds and let it stand on its own.
My understanding is Senator Latvala did put it into bill drafting on Friday.
He
by the
did.
way. Yep.
He did. That's exciting.
It is, yes, ma'am.
And
Thank you for helping nudge him, so I'm sure you
And
nudged him.
that's a heavy lift. But, and I believe that Representative Sprouse
Put it in as
was
well.
putting it over on the House side, so hopefully he got that done.
Great, well, and I agree, and we heard from, when we had our one-on-one with Senator Brandis, the messaging of, at least from his opinion, T-BARTA has no value. And he doesn't know the details of that language, of how it's legislatively created up or anything, just the general, I agree with you completely, Commissioner, that the
We're meeting with him.
message of T-BARTA
have a meeting
is
with
not positive.
It's tomorrow, I think it's tomorrow as well, in the late afternoon.
Okay. Well, I think it'll be a positive when we go to Tallahassee next week to show this accomplishment of
Yes, 2 o'clock,
the MOU.
Ron. 2 o'clock I have a meeting,
Tomorrow?
yeah. FYI. Commissioner Justice, are you with us?
Charlie?
I didn't hear him hang up, but I bet he's sleeping.
I'm still here.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I'm at 2:30.
Oh, then I have to hurry up with my,
Oh, you're fine.
Okay, any other comments from anyone about what we're doing at the state before we move on to the federal?
The Clearwater Beach busway design funding, I saw you had mentioned Senator Brandis. You also said, why is Senator Brandis the one that's going to be filing? Is it because he's had appropriations?
Oh, versus Senator Latvala?
Versus Lavala.
Oh.
I'd rather get it done in the subcommittee first, because if you're getting it done in the full appropriations committee, that's usually not a good thing. So we think we can get it done at the subcommittee level, so.
Okay.
On to the federal priorities?
On to the federal priorities, and let me pass that out. Here we go. Here's our federal one. And like I said, we're planning on a little bit later, we're going to go to Washington in March a little bit, mostly on the Uber issue, and then maybe in April on these. But these are the adopted federal priorities that the PSTA board has approved already. And you know, every single article that's in every single paper and every single website is about the federal process. But we have been moving along on these 4 items pretty rapidly. We had a great meeting just a couple weeks ago in Atlanta with our Federal Transit Administration staff on the Bus Rapid Transit project, on our continued applications for electric buses, on the counting of the Uber rides. So I think, Harry, you can kind of give a summary of what's going on with these items as far as your hearing in DC, but I think we're making some good progress on each of these items.
Sorry.
Sure. Thank you, Brad. First, let me introduce on the phone is Shannon Hanna with VSA is on the phone. I don't know that Brad met Shannon in Washington, but I don't think the other commissioners have met Shannon. Shannon, can you introduce yourself briefly to the commissioners?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I started VSA at the end of 2015. Prior to my time at VSA, I was on the legislative staff for APTA, where I focused on funding, finance, and tax issues, along with, the FAST Act and the reauthorization issues. Prior to that, I worked at another trade association doing transportation things in the aviation industry. And my time on the Hill was spent, I would say, for about 6 years on the Senate Commerce Committee, where I worked on surface transportation issues, including rail, along with aviation and maritime issues.
Very impressive.
So Shannon's she's been working behind the scenes. You haven't really seen her, and she and Steve send Brad a weekly update of what's going on the federal side. So Shannon's the author of that. So she's very well connected on the House and the Senate side, and with FTA. So Steve's on an airplane. He apologizes for not being. He's actually on an airplane to Orlando today. So apologizes for not being on the call. But Shannon may jump in here because she's very well connected on these APTA type issues. But just going down your list, first thing is the FTA small starts. Our goal continues to be to make sure that each fiscal year the small starts are in the queue are funded, so that when your small start application comes up for funding, that the queue is cleared and we're able to make sure that the funding is available for the BRT project. As you probably know, we talked about in the last call, the Congress punted their final work on the appropriations process until the new deadline now is April 28th. So they'll be well over halfway through the fiscal year before they get done with their appropriations projects, which is throwing a lot of things, wrenches in the works here, including a lot of RFPs for some federal programs like LONO and the bus facilities are going to be held up because they are not allowed to do any new start projects until, or funding of any grants until they get more of their money. So we're sort of in limbo right now. Our belief in talking to the appropriators is they've pretty much written the omnibus appropriations bill. It'll come out for fiscal 17 that they'll work on this March and April. So we think that the small starts funding should be in pretty good shape. You never know for sure, but we don't believe that the new administration is going to really make many changes in there. They just don't have the time or capacity to do that with all the other things that they're doing right now on a daily basis. So we think that that'll be good for 17. The trick will be what happens in the fiscal 18 appropriation cycle. And we can skip ahead. I think that's on item 2. Commissioner Long was asking earlier what's going to happen with centralization of FTA or eliminating FTA or whatever's going to happen there. So Congress will wrap up its 17 appropriations work sometime March or April. Typically, a president submits his budget request in February of the year, so it should be coming up in the next week or so. But because it's a new administration and the 17 work's not done, the Trump administration said they're going to submit a skeletal budget sometime in February or early March, and then a more detailed budget probably in May. So the idea of maybe coming to Washington in May may not be a bad idea, just because then you'll have the benefit of seeing their budget request. If they talk about doing something draconian like eliminating FTA or reducing funding for the programs, you could be an opportunity for you to comment upon that when you're there. So, you know, if you can't come in April, maybe an early May meeting wouldn't be a bad idea.
But I thought there were billions of dollars in infrastructure money.
Well, we'll talk about that. That probably won't come till later this year, so that's a notional thing too. But as far as the budget requests, our goal continues to be to fund those programs that you all benefit from, which is the Small Starts, the bus facilities program, the Lono program, and to some extent the Sandbox program, which you competed for and won some funding for last year. So, you know, we'll see that budget request, but probably won't be till April or May, more likely May. And so it'd be good for you to come up and talk about, share your views about that. And it might be good to get some of our community partners involved in that effort too. They're going to propose eliminating FTA, or they're going to propose sending those programs back to the states. It might not be bad for some of our partners like the Chamber and other groups to weigh in and say, why is that a problem for a transportation-starved community like this one? So we could talk about that. But Commissioner Long asked the question, Shannon's going to pipe in here. You asked the question about what are we hearing about the future of FTA. Is there going to be an FTA under the new Trump administration? Will these programs continue to be funded? Will they be eliminated? Shannon, do you want to tell them what you're hearing from your perspective on that?
Sure. What I've been hearing is that it's possible that the Republican Study Committee, which is a caucus of conservative House Republicans, they put out a budget blueprint every year of what they'd like to see. And what we keep hearing is that the administration is very interested in using that as a potential starting point for what they may want to propose later, particularly with the OMB nominee, Office of Management and Budget nominee, Congressman Mick Mulvaney from South Carolina is a member of the Republican Study Committee, so a lot of folks see that there might be some links there. Their budget blueprint does talk about devolution, both of the Highway Trust Fund to a certain degree, not all of the highway programs, but most of the transit programs. And then they talk about flat out eliminating both the Tiger Grant program and the Capital Investment Grant program, which is where the Capital Investment Grant program is where the Small Starts comes out of. Those two programs in particular, I think, are very vulnerable because they don't come out of the Highway Trust Fund or the Mass Transit account. They're funded purely by appropriations out of the general fund. So I think those two, the Tiger Grants, the Capital Investment Grant program, I would say are the ones probably most likely to be taken a hard look at. The good news, I will say, on the backside of this is that traditionally, in the last few years, we've actually seen that the House Transportation Appropriations Subcommittee has actually been better than even the Senate has been in terms of providing higher funding levels for the Capital Investment Grant program. The folks on that subcommittee seem to be very supportive of the programs coming out of and the projects being identified by FTA and like the process. So, whether or not that changes, I don't know. But that's sort of, the good news overshadowing maybe some of the things we need to be cautious and we'll keep an eye out for.
So it's important, you know, on one of your previous trips, when you came up 2 years ago to Washington, we visited with Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida,
Right.
who's the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee Shannon was talking about on transportation, that's been supportive of some of the programs of interest to you. So I think it's important for you all to come up, and we set up a meeting for you with Congressman Diaz-Balart to talk about these issues, because he is one of our 2 remaining Republican appropriators. The other good news piece is that Senator Rubio in this Congress is now on the Appropriations Committee. So he's a new member of the Appropriations Committee, and so we can, you know, try to go see him and his folks and talk about the importance here. We also have 4 members from Florida still on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee. You know, we lost Congressman Micah and Congresswoman Brown lost. They're gone, but they've replaced them with Brian Mast, who's a freshman from the East Coast on the Republican side, and Frederica Wilson from the Democrat side is on the Transportation Committee. She's also on the East Coast. So we have a couple of East Coast members. Lois Frankel continues to be on the committee, and Dan Webster from north of us in Hernando now, and that district is on the committee. So we have some Florida support here, I think, on the committee. So it's, when you all decide to schedule a trip, even if it's before the budget comes out, I think what Shannon was talking about, it's important to make the points that these investment grant programs are important to Florida, and I think we have some good Florida members to help you out. So we'll continue to watch that and see what we hear. There are all kinds of noise coming out of Washington. In addition to the Republican Study Committee, there's a group called the Heritage Action that puts out a budget. They traditionally like to cut and eliminate programs. So that's a program, a group we need to watch what their recommendations are. But the flip side is the new Secretary of Transportation is Elaine Chao. She's been approved by her confirmation has been approved by the committee, but not in the full Senate. That should happen sometime, hopefully this week. She's in her confirmation hearing, she said some very positive things about transportation funding, and so hopefully maybe she'll provide a good counterbalance to the new director of OMB to see the value in some of these programs. And Brad and I talked earlier today about, you know, one of this administration's real focuses is on creating jobs and job opportunities. And as Commissioner Johnson was talking about earlier, you can't have jobs unless you can get people to their jobs. And so, you know, providing access to get people to work, which is something we hear about constantly from potential businesses coming here, is that the transportation just isn't enough of it, is important. I think that's a good theme for this administration is you want to increase job opportunities, you got to increase opportunities for people to get to those jobs. And so I think it's a good theme for you all, whether you're applying for grants or we're talking to members of Congress. So I think it's a message we should continue to
Well, and the infrastructure bills provide huge jobs for citizens.
That's right. And so to shift to that, since you asked about that, so I don't know, I'll yield to Shannon here in a second, but I mean, nobody really knows what's going to happen. The president has talked extensively about the need for infrastructure. He talks about wanting to make better roads, bridges, airports, ports. He hasn't necessarily talked about mass transit, but he has talked about infrastructure in general, or crumbling economy, infrastructure, and what we're going to do. His advisors initially were recommending to him some kind of a program where you provide tax credits to organizations that would provide transportation opportunities that would yield a profit. In other words, toll roads, toll bridges, that kind of thing. Secretary Chao, when she testified in her confirmation hearing, she was asked the question, do you think there'll be a direct federal investment in these infrastructure programs, meaning federal funds like a Tiger Grant or some other direct federal funding that wouldn't be a loan or a tax credit? And she said yes. So you know, I think there's that balancing back and forth exactly what it will be. As far as the schedule, initially the president said this was one of his priorities when he was still president-elect. Speaker Ryan 2 weeks ago had a press conference and talked about the first 100 and 200 days of the new Congress, and he didn't mention infrastructure. He said that wouldn't fall in the first 200 days, that'll come later. And President Trump weighed in last week when he was in Philadelphia with the Republicans at their conference and said infrastructure should be done in the first 200 days. And Speaker Ryan had a press conference a few hours later and said, oh, infrastructure is going to be done in the first 200 days. And so that means looking at doing something between now and August. As I talked to Brad about earlier, the big problem is how do you pay for it? The Democrats last week put out a big $1 trillion investment, 10-year investment package, but it didn't talk about how to pay for it. It talked about the kinds of things they wanted to do, but there wasn't a pay-for side of it. Congress is looking at doing a tax reform bill, and one of the things we're talking about doing is taking offshore profits, what they call repatriation, and allowing corporations to bring that money back in and then taxing at it anywhere between 5 and 10% and taking some of those proceeds and using that towards infrastructure investments. And so all this is tied up in a variety of things. I think there will be an infrastructure bill of some type. It's another issue for you to come up and talk about why that's important. And not only is it important, but to make sure that transit agencies and programs are included in a transit or infrastructure type program. I think you need to make that point, that it's not just roads and bridges, that it's also, buses and rail and on-demand services and that sort of thing.
So I apologize, but I'm going to have to leave, Brad. I have to get back to the courthouse for a meeting with our former congressman. And then I'll see you shortly at our joint meeting.
And Congressman Chris, we've been in communication with him. His staff is working on, he's had some staff turnover, and so they're working on getting a visit out here in the next couple of weeks. They've got it on their agenda. And so,
Great, just let me know and I'll be here.
Yeah, and then Harry said that your meeting, the county,
Joint meeting.
the delegation meeting is now scheduled.
February 21st, and Congressman Chris is coming to that, so
Yay.
we have to talk about transportation there too.
Great.
Yes,
All
we'll
right,
plan on
Patty,
doing
you
that.
take over for me. Right.
I think that's
Thank
it.
you. I apologize, Shan. I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you. I look forward to meeting you too.
Get better, Commissioner Justice.
Thank you. One other issue, we have on your legislative agenda is how to account the on-demand ride services, ride share, towards your federal ridership numbers, and talked to you and Cassandra a little bit about this. And Brad and I talked earlier today about there's actually a new caucus in the Congress called the Sharing Economy Caucus, which is a group of members that are interested in on-demand services, whether it's transportation or Airbnb or all those sort of internet-type things that are coming up. We think this might be a good subject to raise with them to try and gather some support for making a policy change that would count these miles and riders for what you're doing. As your Uber numbers continue to increase, it would be a good thing for you to get credit for that. It'll give you a bigger federal share of funding. And the other thing we talked about, Brad, was maybe trying to visit with the Uber folks in Washington. When you're up there, they have a growing federal shop up there. It'd be good to maybe get them on board, use some of their broad legislative support to spread the message about why this is important. Because if you get credit for that, that'll encourage other bus providers to think about using Uber for some of their on-demand services.
We can help set that up, and you guys, once you know the dates, we can easily set that up for you.
With Uber, yeah.
Can I add to that, Brad? What I've been telling people is after 30 years in social services, we've spent millions and billions of dollars in rehabilitating people and and Brad has told me already that the money that we have received this year went so well and so fast that we have people lined up that we can't serve. And that, when you tell these people that we're all talking to, we have people that are sitting here waiting that have been trained, that have been on social services, that want off social services. We can't put them to work because we don't have the money to serve them. And I think that, how we're going to estimate those numbers, though.
Well, we do have the numbers on that, but one idea that our staff has come up with that you saw that in our efforts to tout what Patty is talking about showing that our programs for transportation disadvantage are really getting people to jobs. We, as you all see every Friday or every other Friday, we have a crack video Hollywood Oscar-winning movie people, and we made a little video of riders who, testimonials of riders who say that they would not keep their job without the TD program. And we were able to present that to the TD Commission in support. And so we've been wondering is there a way that we can show some of these folks, congressional staff members, or I don't know, send it. I don't know if they would click on the email, or how to use the videos as part of our advocacy, both in Tallahassee and in DC, be great. Just show, that way they can see from the actual riders.
And how many businesses are trying to hire people, but they can't because they can't get them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message, for the new administration is, again, getting people to work. They're talking about taking people off the welfare rolls and putting them to work, so this is part of that. And I think we should figure out how to get that clip down to something we could use and distribute to maybe as a follow-up, maybe if we have some meetings with the folks in Washington about this, and follow up with the videotape and say, hey, thanks, but thought you might like to see this, and this is what our riders are telling us, because it's just not first mile, last mile. It's like you say, it's the transportation for the disadvantaged, the folks who have to work the late shift when there's no buses running. You're doing all those programs.
And how many people are we taking to school that couldn't go to school without us?
We're taking 55,000 St. Pete College student trips per month. Yeah.
That's important.
Yeah.
Those are, that's what everyone is saying that they want. They want everyone in school.
Yeah.
And I think it's good, and I think that's a
Maybe
good
college
message.
does have something, yeah.
It's a good message to the new administration on why you can't eliminate the FTA, because you're the people that are providing the link between jobs and the transportation. So we'll continue to work on that. But I think when you're up in March, I think it would be good to do a round of visits on this subject and see how we can. We talk about counting the miles and providing additional service for the disadvantaged to get to work.
And students.
Yeah. And in community, and make the differential that this is a community that doesn't have anything mass transit other than the bus service. So some communities have rail and bus and everything else. You're limited to what you have, and you can't throw away the FTA funding just because other communities have rail service that's probably more ridden, but.
Yeah, like San Francisco this morning, they were showing, you didn't see that piece. They decided how to get more people transported because they have such horrible transportation there. So they have now dug holes in the street where they're going to tunnel through. They figured out how to tunnel underground. We're not tunneling anywhere in Florida, I promise you that. They can tunnel all out there.
Yeah, San Francisco is building like the most expensive tunneled multimodal thing right in their downtown, underground, yeah.
That'd be good.
We can't.
But the last item, Brad, on the federal agenda, it's not on your agenda, but I think Commissioner Long had to leave. You talked about the MPOs and what's going to, there are these federal regulations out there that would require regionalization of the MPOs under federal regulation, and if you didn't regionalize, you wouldn't be eligible for federal funding. This is one of these regulations that's caught up in the new Trump administration. What's going to happen with regulations that were started under the Obama administration? Are they going to repeal them, stop them? What's going to happen? And we don't know the answer to that one on the MPO regulations. We'll continue to watch it for you. And I don't know, Shannon, unless you have something new on the MPO situation.
I don't.
Yeah, so we'll continue to watch that one for you.
Was it you or, your reports are excellent that you send me, but I saw some place that there was some kind of like listing of Obama regulations that were under consideration for review or change, and the MPO was one of them listed on the...
There were about 200 plus regulations that were on a list that they were thinking about reversing or stopping, and they're whittling through those now, so.
Okay.
It depends on whether they were final. If they became final, then there's one process to eliminate them. If they were still not final, then the current administration can stop them a different way. So we're working through it, but we'll continue to watch that, and we'll give you updates. I know it's of interest to you here, but primarily to Commissioner Long and the county too.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
I think that's it.
I think that's it. And since we don't have a majority,
By consensus, you can adjourn.
Charlie, do you have anything that you want in future meetings?
Deal with that later.
Charlie, it's Patty. I think Charlie,
Somebody being signed out.
Did he?
Somebody sent out that Shannon was still on.
Probably a minute ago, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so Charlie's gone, I'm all that's left, so,
We'll be we'll know.
okay. We don't have anything left to vote on except
You
to,
can rule by fiat now, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
so, do you have anything, Brad, you want in future meetings?
When is the next meeting? This one was out of cycle, right? This one,
Yes.
Was this one else?
February?
Today's is actually supposed to be
February. Oh, so the
February.
next one's in March.
He's not available. He wasn't
We were
available.
gonna be through the travel.
Oh, okay.
The next
Uh,
one is March
Oh, right, yeah, because the next one,
1st.
March 1st, okay.
March 1st. March 1st.
Okay.
I can sort of see on my calendar that
Do
on
you
March.
want to vote to adjourn? Other
We'll
business?
witness your adjournment.
We'll watch. We'll watch you adjourn the meeting.
Adjourn.
Okay.
Yay. Okay. Anything else, you guys?
No?
No?
We don't have any fraudulent voting here.
Do what?
I think we are, I think we're recording it. Aren't we video showing it?
Not video.
Live streaming?
Video in here. Unless he.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, there is.
There is video?
That Bob
Yeah.
created.
Okay.
He created a chart.
I was gonna see if we are live streaming it.
Created a chart just to show us what the information needed to be. And I'm like, your chart looks cool. I'm stealing it.
Okay, we're good.
We're good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, the live streaming is
So,
helpful.
yes, I am going.
I wish Hart had live streaming.
Good. Well, we talked about you today at lunch. We talked about maybe if you were there, we could talk about the transportation for Hispanics a little bit.
I would like to, because
Because it'd be a good subject to write
Oh,
down.
Mr. today at our meeting,
All right.
misunderstood the program.
the meeting after our meeting,
Talk about it at the after conference and on your congressional. visit.
about
Schedule.
the schedules.
As a business person, I can promise you, I have to
Do what you want.
plan